All right. It's Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis. Look at that. Look at that. So this came out a few years ago. How many years ago? So, yeah, about 10 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, this was one of the classic books. I mean, a lot of these books I'm looking at today are stuff, I would have kind of became acquainted of when I was a teenager, 16, 17, like William S. Burroughs, Rimbaud, uh, Franz Kafka, and then a new translation by Sirs and Bernakovsky comes out, and Bernowski. I don't know where I got the K in there. Comes out, and then I reread it. But I mean, I could have read it. I mean, people used to read this book as a sort of an allegory or something. But I just to me, it's just kind of like I just read it as a straightforward book, pretty much. So let's read the opening. It's pretty famous. I mean, I'm not going to skip the Cronenberg. I didn't know. To me, like some of these books can be made into movies. That's what's great about books. You can't really make them into movies. Like this would be one of them. I mean, the Diving Bell and Butterfly is a pretty good attempt. But this book and Lolita just seem like the movie's like something else. Okay, so let's read this one. I mean, people probably have this kind of memorized, so let's see how this one's different. When Gregor Samsa woke up one morning from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed right there in his bed into some sort of monstrous insect. He was lying on his back, which was hard, like a carapace. And when he raised his head a little, he saw his curved brown belly segmented by rigid arches, atop which the blanket, already slipping, was just barely managing to cling. His many legs, pitifully thin compared to the rest of him, waved helplessly before his eyes. What in the world has happened to me? He thought. It was no dream. His room, a proper room, if admittedly rather too small, lay peacefully between the four familiar walls above the table, where an unpacked collection of cloth samples was arranged. Samsa was a traveling salesman, hung the picture he recently clipped from a glossy magazine, placed it in an attractive gilt frame. This picture showed a lady in a fur hat and a fur boa who sat erect, holding out to the viewer a heavy fur muff in which her entire forearm had vanished. Wow. So, so I mean, it goes. I mean, even though he's turning an insect, he's still like kind of acting like a human being and stuff. Um, so this book is written like 100 years ago or more, late 1912. I mean, it's very much unlike a lot of, and I mean, a lot of the words don't really translate so much in the German and stuff. I think that's like the problem. So there's always it's a good idea to have a sort of an updated translation every once in a while. Sometimes, because like we saw in the Ashbury, because he was the original translator just used the brand of cigarettes which don't exist anymore. So and and then the Burroughs book, he's talking about some actor which may be unfamiliar to most people. So Gregor Samsa wakes up. He's transformed himself into a monstrous vermin. So yeah, the metamorphosis. It's also been translated as the transformation, and he's transformed into a huge insect, monstrous vermin. And let's see. Okay, so the plot. Stuck on his back, he's unable to get up and leave the bed. He reflects on his job as a salesman and cloth merchant, which he characterizes as being full of temporary and constantly changing human relationships, which never come from the heart. He sees his employer as a despot and would quickly quit his job if he were not for his family, if he was not the sole family breadwinner and working off his bankrupt father's debts. And while trying to move, Gregor finds that his office manager, the chief clerk, has shown up to check on him, indignant about Gregor's unexcused absence. Gregor attempts to communicate with both the manager and his family, but all they can hear from behind the door is incomprehensible vocalizations. Gregor, like he's he can still think, but he's not communicating as a human. He's like this. He's a vermin. He laboriously drags himself across the floor, opens the door. The clerk, upon seeing the transformed Gregor, flees the apartment. Gregor's family is horrified, and his father drives him back towards the room. Gregor is injured when he tries to force himself through the doorway, which is too narrow for him, but gets unstuck when the father shoves him through. With Gregor's unexpected transformation, his family is deprived of financial stability. They keep Gregor locked in his room, and he begins to accept his new identity and adapt to his new body. His sister Greta is the only one willing to bring him food, which he finds Gregor only likes it if it's rotten. He spends much of his time crawling around the floor, the wall, the ceiling. Upon discovering Gregor's new pastime, Greta decides to remove his furniture to give him more space. She and her mother begin to empty the room of everything except the sofa, under which Gregor hides whenever someone comes in. He finds their actions deeply distressing, fearing that he might forget his past as a human, and this really tries to save a particular love portrait on the wall of a woman clad in fur. His mother loses consciousness at the sight of him, clinging to the image to protect it. When Greta rushes out of the room to get some aromatic spirits, Gregor follows her and is slightly hurt when she drops a medicine bottle and it breaks. Their father returns home and angrily hurls apples at Gregor, one of which becomes lodged in a sensitive spot on his back and severely wounds him. Gregor suffers from his injuries and eats very little. His father and mother all get jobs and increasingly begin to neglect them, and his room begins to be used for storage for a time. His family leaves Gregor's door open in the evening so he can listen to them talk to each other, but this happens less and less frequently. And once they rent a room in an apartment to 3 male tenants, since they are not told about Gregor, one day the charwoman, who briefly looks in on Gregor each day when she arrives and before she leaves, neglects to fully close his door fully. Attracted by Greta's violin playing in the living room, Gregor crawls out and is spotted by the unsuspecting tenants who complain about the apartment's unhygienic conditions, and they say they are leaving and will not pay for anything the time they stayed and may take illegal action. Greta, who is taking care of Gregor, realizes the burden his existence put each member of the family, tells her parents they must get rid of it or they will be ruined. Gregor, understanding that he's no longer wanted, laboriously makes his way back to his room and dies of starvation before sunrise. His body is discovered by the charwoman, who alerts the family and then disposes of the corpse. The relieved and optimistic father, mother, and sister all take the day off from work. They travel by tram into the countryside, make plans to move to a smaller apartment to save money. During the short trip, Mr. and Mrs. Samsa realize that despite all their hardships that have brought some paleness to their face, Greta has grown up into a pretty young lady and a good figure, and they think about her finding a husband. So, yeah, this is a crazy book. I mean, this is insane. I mean, this is like, Thomas Mann, James Joyce, Proust are all writing at this time, and he's writing this. Wow, I mean, it's very short too. Like all that, it's a very short book. It's like it could be read. I read a lot of these books. I read, in one sitting. This is like just amazing. Like, are there any questions here? I've only got about 10 minutes, but I mean, a lot of people have kind of had religious uh, interpretations of the book, and I mean, you know, I mean, just the whole idea that people get older, or people be like your brothers or your family members become like you know just become sort of like hanging around and become non-useful. It's a I mean it's like because like Kafka didn't live, he wasn't that old, he didn't live like old age. Let's see, Kafka, he died when he was 40, so it was like he didn't live very long. So but he just totally grasped, like the fact that like one of your family members gets sick or has dementia or something, and he just becomes like this other thing, that's like less than human. And this is pre, Hitler and all that stuff. Metamorphosis has been translated into English more than 20 times. Um, and the other one, the one that I read before, Edwin and Willamar Muir, as Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed to his bed into a giant insect. So they all, like all these ones, everyone has the first sentence is all different. Giant insect, monstrous kind of vermin, monstrous vermin, giant bug, enormous bug, gargantuan pest, monster cockroach, a vile insect, horrible vermin. Um, Vladimir Nabokov, who is a lepidopterist as well as a writer, concluded from the details in the text that Gregor was not a cockroach, but a beetle with wings under its shell and capable of flight. Nabokov left the sketch annotated just over 3 feet long on the opening page of his English copy. And in his accompanying lecture, he discussed the type of insect has been transformed into, noting that the clean lady addressed Gregor as a dung beetle. Come here for a bit, old dung beetle, or hey, look at the old dung beetle. Nabokov remarks that this was just her friendly way of addressing him, and that Gregor is not technically a dung beetle, just merely a big beetle. So, this is, I mean, joke. There's so many like I mean, I definitely read the Edwin Muir one, and then Joachim New Groschel, who I read a lot of translations, usually from the French. But I mean, this book, I mean, it's like one of those books. Let's see. Oh yeah, yeah. He did the story. Yeah, okay. But Alfred John. But he did a lot of German too. Okay, so I mean, like, it's just one of those books that you just kind of take for granted. You don't. It's not a genre book. It's not. It's not a metaphorical book. It's just a book. It's a realistic book. Like The Nose, or by Gogol, or this book, where there's like some kind of device where the world's changing. The world somehow transformed by this new device. And I mean, Will Self has a lot of this stuff in his books and short stories where there's some sort of new perspective, or there's a there's like a switcheroo, and then the people just kind of go on like, okay, this is what's going on. I just remember that from reading his books. But I mean, this book, it's not like these books where people have like magical glasses or can fly or something. It's like some kind of fantasy book. This is kind of a realistic book that just kind of sheds more light on what it's like to be a human and stuff. Okay, so I mean, I don't want to go on too long, but yeah, if you have any questions. So that's the Metamorphosis of Kafka. Definitely suggest you read more Kafka if you can. I mean, it's not there's not much. His novels aren't that good, but the stories and the Metamorphosis are great.